As I mentioned, the Philadelphia Court of Common Pleas is closed through May 29th. That means the next scheduled conciliation conference will be on Thursday, June 4th. Now, the courts may extend that beyond that date. We don't really know at this point. The way this actually came about, if you're interested, is that on March 18th, the Pennsylvania Supreme Court issued an order directing all courts to be closed through at least Friday, April 3rd. And then on April 1st, the court extended the closure through April 30th. And then just this week, the Philadelphia Court of Common Pleas extended the court closures until May 29th. Rachel, can you go to the next slide? And let me pause for just 1 second. So as I mentioned, Philadelphia courts are closed. Some other local courts have gone beyond the Pennsylvania Supreme Court's order as well, including Chester and Montgomery counties. If you are interested and you want to read the court orders for the Philadelphia Court of Common Pleas, you can read all of their orders at the link at the last bullet point here. Or if you were interested for whatever reason in seeing the court orders as they affect other courts throughout the Commonwealth, you can see the link in the second bullet. After today, if you want to review this PowerPoint and see all of these links, you can find that information on CLS's website. Michelle Bricks, when you have a moment, could you post on the chat page the direct link to the clsphila.org page that will take people to all the information for homeowners? The link that Michelle will post includes lots and lots of information for homeowners, but also for advocates as well. Rachel, can you go to the next slide? So what's going on with foreclosure sheriff sales? Again, this information is current as of today. The sales that were scheduled for April 7th have been rescheduled to September 1st. The sales that were scheduled for May 5th have been rescheduled to July 7th. And the sales that were scheduled for June 2nd have been rescheduled to September 1st. So the next sheriff sales that will occur, again, as we speak right now, is going to be on July 7th. If anybody tells you that this isn't correct or gives you pushback or wants to know what the authority is for this postponement, you can look at the court's orders that are available on the court's website. And in the third column on this table, I've indicated the authority for where you might find the order that provides the information about the reschedule dates. Rachel, can you go to the next one? All right. In a moment, Rachel LaBush is going to talk about the specific loss mitigation options that are available to homeowners, but I wanted to reiterate what our general advice is to homeowners. If the biggest piece of information, the biggest piece of advice that we're giving is that if you cannot make your mortgage payments due to a COVID-19 related drop in income, you should contact your mortgage servicer as soon as possible to let them know. And when you do contact your servicer, to let the servicer know that the reason why you're having trouble with your mortgage payment is because of the pandemic, is because of the COVID-19. We have received a lot of feedback from homeowners and housing counseling agencies and others that it's been difficult to contact to reach the servicers. On this page, as well as on the link that Michelle Bricks has posted in the chat box, you'll find two really important links. The first one is information about servicers and their COVID-19 responses. This is a chart that Michelle Bricks has very helpfully created that includes the contact information, both by phone or by website, for the 17 most common servicers, as well as what we currently know about the type of loss mitigation that they're offering to borrowers. The other thing that we'd like to know, and this really needs help from everybody, is if you're having trouble reaching any particular servicer, please complete our survey. And the link is on the web page, the slide right now, but it's also, again, linked to the website, the clsphila.org site. It's a simple Google document, a Google form. It'll take you less than 5 minutes to complete, and it simply asks, who did you try to reach? When did you try to reach them? And what was the result of when you tried to reach them? We are working with local and state and national partners to make sure that servicers are reachable, that they have the right amount of staff, that they have the resources that's dedicated, because none of these programs are going to work if homeowners can't actually reach their servicer. So we want to know, were you on the phone for 20 minutes and then got dropped? Were you on the phone for longer? Did you try to reach them every day for a week and still couldn't get through? We want to know this information so that we can try to identify themes, try to identify patterns, and that we can then take this both to the servicer directly, but also to the regulators that are supposed to ensure that the servicers are accessible to borrowers. This information is true not just for people who are newly behind in their mortgages, but people who you might be working with who are currently in foreclosure, who maybe are in a TPP and have an issue maybe with a TPP payment, or otherwise their lives have been disrupted because of the pandemic. Rachel?
Okay. I'm going to pick up here with the presentation. The last time I think we talked to all of you about loss mitigation was before the CARES Act, right, was signed into law. So we just had the initial announcements from the middle of March. And this is, I guess, mostly historical information at this point on this slide. But I just wanted you to know that the slides will be available from our website, and all of the guidance that I'm going to talk about is linked to in this presentation, so it's easy to find any authority that you might need for any of this. So, initially on March 18th, there was the 60-day foreclosure moratorium was announced by each of the government entities that back or regulate mortgages. So HUD, VA, Fannie and Freddie each announced that 60-day moratorium, which kind of got expanded on with the CARES Act. I'm going to get into details about each of those separately. But 60 days didn't sound like that long when it started, and this 60 days is going to be up May 17th, so we'll see what happens after that. Sorry, there we go. Okay, so the CARES Act passed on March 27th, and that applies to all federally backed mortgage loans. What I've seen is this is about 70%, 2/3 or 70% of mortgages, residential mortgages in this country are federally backed, either FHA, VA, Fannie, Freddie, or something else. Rural mortgages that we don't see in Philadelphia. But the CARES Act does not apply to all mortgages. So the non-government backed mortgages, this doesn't apply. It incorporated that moratorium and kind of expanded on it. In the beginning, people were wondering what's covered by the moratorium. Is it just sheriff sales? Is it just filing a foreclosure? But for those loans covered by the CARES Act, they shouldn't really be taking any step to move the foreclosure forward during these 60 days. And also government-backed mortgages, borrowers are supposed to be entitled to 180-day forbearance, basically upon request. They just are supposed to be able to contact the servicer, say, I'm having a coronavirus-related hardship of some kind, and then they're supposed to be offered the forbearance without having to submit documentation, and that is in the individual guidance for each different kind of mortgage that I'm going to cover. As you all know, forbearances aren't like ways to make payments magically disappear, but it does suspend the homeowner's obligation to make those payments during the forbearance period, and there shouldn't be any fees, charges, or additional interest beyond what would regularly accumulate during those forbearances. The CARES Act also has some kind of weak credit protection for those, which this is the one point I must say that I'm not completely clear on, because I've read a lot of different things about it, and I don't think it was written that clearly in there. But for people who were current before they experienced the coronavirus related hardship and they get into a forbearance, it's not supposed to negatively affect their credit. But for many of us where our clients were already behind before March, it's not going to help them. They can still be, still have negative credit reporting. I'm going to skip over the bankruptcy thing because this presentation was originally put together for legal aid lawyers throughout Pennsylvania. But if you do come across somebody who's already in a bankruptcy and have a question about how they might be affected, feel free to reach out to your liaison about that. And I'll skip over the eviction because there's so much to cover for homeownership, but there are protections for tenants as well. And then a link to the full CARES Act. But okay, we'll start out with FHA loans. So initially HUD just announced the 60-day foreclosure moratorium. And that's all that we had at the last time that I spoke with you. But then on April Fool's Day, they announced the COVID-19 National Emergency Standalone Partial Claim in a Mortgagee Letter 2020-06. And this is kind of in response to the question of what is going to happen to the borrowers at the end of the forbearance period. So basically what HUD has announced is for people who were not behind in March, people who are less than 31 days behind in March, if they get a forbearance because of their coronavirus related hardship, at the end of that forbearance, they should be eligible, with some big asterisks, to have those missed payments put to the back of the loan as part of a partial claim. And that is only available for owner occupants. And it is subject to the statutory limits on partial claims. So if you have clients who got a previous partial claim, may have already used up some of it or maxed it out, they may not be able to take advantage of this. And it also only covers missed payments, just principal, interest, taxes, and insurance. It won't cover, the people eligible for it would not have been in foreclosure already, so there shouldn't be legal fees and things like that, but they couldn't be part of the partial claim. You have to contact the lender to request a forbearance. This, like all the other assistance, all the other loss mitigation I'm going to cover, it's not automatic. It has to be requested. The question, so this is yellow because it actually was yellow on the website itself. I took the screenshot. There are COVID FAQ on for FHA loans, and that FAQ, the same document, includes FAQ for HUD insured reverse mortgages, HECMs. There are a lot of good answers in there for some of the questions you may have. And this is probably one of the #1 questions that we had about what to do with our current clients who are caught up in this. And this FAQ makes it clear that if you weren't behind before the forbearance, then you can probably get the standalone partial claim. But if you were behind before the forbearance, you will be reviewed for all the standard FHA loss mitigation programs at the end. The lender has the duty to reach out before the end of the forbearance to see what the person's situation is and if they could otherwise qualify for FHA HAMP. That's probably what you're going to want to go for. Reverse mortgages, those are government, and so the vast majority of reverse mortgages, you probably know, are insured by HUD and are covered by the CARES Act. So the moratorium on foreclosures until May 17th applies, and all the provisions about forbearances, though those look a little different with reverse mortgages because there aren't usually monthly payments due on reverse mortgages. Mortgagee Letter 2020-06 also covers, to some extent, reverse mortgages. It gives a 6-month extension to all the due and payable deadlines under reverse mortgages. So that's basically if there's been a breach, any of those situations where they call a reverse mortgage due, like failure to occupy, failure to pay taxes or insurance. I'm sorry about my loud child. Or death of the borrower, there's basically an extension on all of those deadlines before the the mortgage company should foreclose, but somebody should still reach out and request the forbearance. The question came up, does this extension apply to the mortgagee optional election? That's for the surviving spouse situation that many of you may be familiar with. Yes, it does. Those deadlines are extended as well. And then if you have a borrower who was maybe had just gotten a letter demanding repayment of taxes and insurance, or if they were already in a repayment plan for taxes and insurance, they're entitled to get a 6-month forbearance renewable for another 6 months for that as well. And then this last one here is for all those, the biggest, FHA and HECM nerds amongst us, but there was a rule that limited your right to get into as a subsequent payment arrangement for property charges if you defaulted on a previous one. This one says, okay, if you can't continue with the payment agreement that you have already, you can reapply and get a new one when you have the ability to pay again. And again, a lot of these questions are covered in the FHA COVID FAQ. VA mortgages, I know we don't see these as often, but they're out there. These are also covered by the CARES Act. Oh my God, sorry. And so they're also covered by the moratorium. The VA issued 2 circulars that are relevant to coronavirus, just basically reiterating that people can get the forbearances, 6-month forbearances upon request, and that no documentation should be required. FHA's guidance is also clear that no documentation of the hardship should be required to get forbearance. And then at the end of it, the borrower gets reviewed for all the VA loan mod options that are in the handbook. And that is basically all we know for VA loans. There wasn't any special partial claim kind of thing announced for them. I'm gonna skip over USDA mortgages. This was something I put in for those out in the parts of Pennsylvania that have those farms. Okay, next up, Fannie and Freddie loans. Also covered by the CARES Act because they are government-backed mortgages. And Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac have issued a lot of pretty detailed guidance about loss mitigation during the pandemic. They updated the lender letters. They had already issued lender letters at the time we last spoke, but they updated them to conform with the CARES Act. And I have the links there. You can see the updates are in the letters. Essentially, people are supposed to also get forbearances upon request if they have a coronavirus-related hardship. And they're supposed to be reviewed for a loan mod option before the end of the forbearance. These are available. It doesn't have to be owner occupied. Anything except a vacant house should qualify: primary residence, second home, or investment properties. And then those borrowers who were essentially current as of March will be maybe eligible for special disaster relief modifications. And I have a little more detail about those on the following pages. Again, people had questions about what if you had a borrower in a trial period plan and then they got hit with the hardship from the pandemic. I found in Freddie's FAQ, they addressed that, and I put the quote at the bottom here. But basically, you can switch from a TPP to a forbearance, and you're not going to be penalized for having somehow failed that TPP. You should be evaluated. It's not that you'll be able to get back into your old TPP, but you should be able to be evaluated for a new one once the borrower has income again and is ready to apply for a loan mod. Okay, this is like getting into the weeds a little bit, but for those borrowers who maybe just missed 1 or 2 payments, say March, April, and May, just push this interloper away, and then resume making payments, but they're running 1 or 2 months behind. Fannie and Freddie both issued guidance it's kind of like a streamlined way to just put those 2 payments, 1 or 2 payments to the back of the loan. I don't know how many people we're going to see who just miss 1 or 2 payments and get back on track making payments. And then you know how to look up a loan to find out if it's owner insured. It can be done online or on the phone. You are going to need the last 4 digits of the borrower's social security number to check that. And then I think the pages that they have are pretty good, much better than HUD's in terms of information. I put the links here. You just follow the links through to the single family guidance. That's where the detailed information is. The big question is what, for everyone really, is what's going to happen at the end of the forbearances. I mean, we're going to have so many people at that point, you know, 6 or more months behind in their loan, what's going to happen. So what Fannie and Freddie have said is that for the people who were not behind, they're eligible for these disaster relief modifications that were actually created a couple of years ago, but are now going to be available to everybody in that situation who were current, fell behind because of coronavirus. And they're called Extend Mod, or which is essentially putting the missed payments, extending the loan out, and with those missed payments added to the back of the loan. Or this Cap and Extend modification, which is going to be available to people who, where there were escrow advances made basically during the forbearance that they can't afford to repay within the 60 months. And I don't know how common that's going to be, but to the borrower, it should essentially seem that the missed payments get added to the back of the loan. For people who were already behind as of March 13th, or for some other reason don't qualify for the Extend or Cap and Extend mods, they're supposed to be reviewed for the standard Fannie Mae or Freddie Mac loss mitigation, which is essentially flex mod at this point. And then if for some reason they don't accept that or don't qualify for it, then they are going to be asked to reinstate the loan or to negotiate a short sale or be thrown into foreclosure. And the guidance for Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac has been pretty clear that they're supposed to warn people about this up front. And from what I've seen, they are issuing some pretty dire warnings up front with the forbearances. And in fact, if you go look at the Fannie and Freddie pages, they have on them a script that you can read that says basically how the servicer is supposed to run through it with the person and warn them. So if you hear people saying that they've been warned, that's what's supposed to happen. But they're not supposed to be told that you have to repay it all at once at the end of the forbearance. So if anyone's getting that message from the servicer, that's incorrect, and I think we should complain about that. And speaking of complaining, the FHFA, which is the umbrella, agency that oversees Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac, and the CFPB have announced that they're going to be sharing complaint data during this period about the forbearances. So if you are seeing a problem with the servicer, you can, if you report it to the CFPB through the CFPB complaint process, that's going to get back to Fannie and Freddie. So if you're seeing systematic problems, it's a good idea to do that. And then, so if you have a loan that is not, one of these government-backed mortgages, then there is a big question mark about what's going to be happening with them in a lot of cases. But one of the things I wanted to highlight was that PHFA specifically has announced that its moratorium is broader than what the government agencies have announced, the federal agencies have announced. They said that the moratorium will remain until impacts from the virus subside. And that they're not going to be doing negative credit reporting for any of their customers, and it doesn't matter whether it was related to coronavirus or not that someone's behind. And the link there is for the update on their website. Some of you may have seen or heard about the Attorney General, Pennsylvania Attorney General, announcing this PA Care package. That's kind of a broad array of consumer protections, temporary consumer protections that the Attorney General negotiated with a bunch of banks and credit unions in the Commonwealth. And so a lot of the protections, they may be useful to people. There's a lot in there that's not specifically homeownership related. It has to do with bank accounts and other kinds of auto loans and student loans and things like that. But the mortgage related parts of it are basically buying into that 60-day moratorium for all the mortgages they service, and then a 90-day grace period, which is essentially forbearance, but with no promise of what's going to happen at the end. It's like a payment extension on mortgages. And some of those banks and credit unions are ones I never see in Philly, or at least not with mortgages. but I just wanted to highlight that PNC, Citizens, and Bank of America have signed on, and the link there, they are updating it. They are adding banks as they join. And then again, just another plug for the spreadsheet that Mike mentioned earlier.
Rachel, can we take a quick stop for some questions? So Maria had asked about what about if a client had a modification? Actually, let's do Rosalind's question first. Rosalind says, "What will lenders who bought my loan provide relief?" Do you want to take that, or do you want?
Will lenders who bought my loan?
My loan, right. So maybe, Rosalind, maybe I can take a stab at this, and Rachel, you can fill in the gaps. So the step in looking at whether somebody is going to be eligible for relief or for forbearance is to figure out, is this a federally backed mortgage or not? Is it an FHA insured mortgage? Is it a Fannie or Freddie mortgage? Or is it one of those types of mortgages that we don't see too often here in Philadelphia, but that's owned or insured by the VA, or one of these USDA rural mortgages as well? If it is a federally backed mortgage, then the next question is which type of forbearances are available? So Rachel did a really great job as talking about the types of forbearances that are available for people with FHA mortgages or with Fannie and Freddie mortgages. So Rosalind, the question is not so much like who originated the mortgage, but like what is the current status of the mortgage right now? Is it FHA insured? Is it Fannie and Freddie? Or if it's not FHA, Fannie and Freddie, or again, USDA or VA, then it's a question of what's the patchwork of loss mitigation options that are being offered by these by these servicers. But the question is not what happens if it's sold, but really like what type of mortgage is it at the current moment. Just to give folks a heads up on this, when we talk about federally backed mortgages and non-federally backed mortgages, the estimates are that there's about 70% of mortgages are federally backed, so which are covered by the CARES Act and by the other guidance. And it's really that 30% that many of us are really worried about, because those 30% are the folks who most servicers are saying will give people a 90-day forbearance, but there's less guidance about what's going to be required for them. Maria also, sorry, Berta. Maria also asked the question about what about if the client had a modification before? I don't, to my recollection, and Rachel, correct me if I'm wrong, but my recollection is that it will not matter if somebody has had a modification before as to whether they're going to be getting one of the COVID-19 related forbearances.
Yeah, and I want to be really clear about that. Sorry, can people hear me all right? Okay. Yes. That you don't, for the forbearances, you could have already been behind. You don't have to have been current in March to get the forbearances. Whether you're current in March matters for whether certain kind of loan mods at the end. But I mean, I know that's not directly answering this question, but I agree with Mike. Previous loan mods should not affect at all people's eligibility for forbearances. They should not. Well, I can see how there's a few little twists in how it may affect your eligibility for certain kinds of relief afterwards. The biggest one, I think, could be if your loan is an FHA HAMP with or something with a partial claim, that could affect how much partial claim you can get at the end of your forbearance now. But you shouldn't be disqualified from getting forbearance because of any previous loan mod.
Yeah. And Alexa says, when will HEMAP open back up? So I think this slide, right, Rachel?
Yeah, nice segue. Okay. I did want to discuss HEMAP, because at the beginning of this, I thought, wow, the situation looks perfect for continuing HEMAP, but apparently it's not exactly perfect, because PHFA is not accepting new applications for HEMAP right now. They announced that officially as of last week. For those people who had applications already in process before April 15th, they are processing those. And for people, like I had a client who was approved before April 15th, it hasn't closed yet. They confirmed that his loan is going to close and he's going to get that paperwork, but they're not accepting new applications, and they're not. And part of that is because they said the courts are not moving foreclosures. There's a moratorium, court moratorium, and a moratorium on a lot of the loans right now for foreclosures, and partly because of that face-to-face meeting requirement, which no one should be meeting really face-to-face with anybody in person right now. I think that a lot of people may need HEMAP when they come out of the crisis that they're facing now. And I know that increased funding for HEMAP is something that's important to us, and probably a lot of you may be pushing for that too at some point. I also, you may know that HEMAP will normally cover, so we don't know. The answer to Alexis's question is we don't know yet, because some of that, it depends on the courts reopening and maybe the moratoria getting extended. And I did want to mention that on the FHA FAQ, they say they're continuing to monitor the situation, and they may extend that initial 60-day moratorium on foreclosures may be extended. I think Fannie and Freddie somewhere said this similar thing. So it's possible that the moratorium will extend and then HEMAP may be kicked down the road. I don't know. But by the time HEMAP reopens, I think it's highly likely that it'll cover up to 36 months, because unemployment has risen so quickly in Pennsylvania, like everywhere.
Rachel, both Barbara Davis and Berta Sarmina posted specific questions about HEMAP and some of the consequences for homeowners that PHFA is not currently accepting new applications. So Alexis, Barbara, and Berta, thanks so much for raising these questions. Can I ask, I'm going to type my email here. If anybody has any situations, wait, hold on, I can't do two things at once. So first I'll type my email. If somebody is working with a homeowner who is being harmed, the fact that PHFA is not accepting new applications, or is not processing applications, or is not doing the appeals, would you mind emailing me them directly? Yes, and Berta asked, can we push PHFA to reopen continuing assistance? Yes. So PHFA has said, look, why should we process, or why should we accept new HEMAP applications? The courts are closed anyway. And so in order for us to push back against that, it would be super helpful for us to have some good source homeowner stories about why homeowners are actually being harmed by PHFA's decision not to accept HEMAP applications. So, so Barbara, it sounds like the situation that you're working with that client, would be eligible for HEMAP, should be able to apply for HEMAP. If anybody has any good situations, or working with any homeowners who are being harmed by PHFA's decision, can you please email me? Ideally by the end of the day, but if not, if you don't have time, or by the end of the day, sometime beginning of next week, with just a situation about why your homeowner is being harmed, that would be really helpful in HEMAP, in the advocacy with PHFA. And just to give you a flag about what might be coming down the pike, is that PHFA has not received new money from the General Assembly for almost 10 years. And it would be super helpful if the General Assembly were to use some of its federal CARES Act money to fund HEMAP in a really significant way. And so within the coming weeks or so, we hope to be working with PHFA and the General Assembly to ask that HEMAP get additional funding. So these types of stories would be helpful in making that pitch. And please stay tuned, because this is probably not the last you'll hear of this plan. Laura says, if we are providing video counseling, which has been recently allowed by PHFA, could that be considered face-to-face for these purposes? Laura, I think your answer is absolutely yes. PHFA has made the decision, though, that they're currently not accepting new applications, and it's not because of the face-to-face meeting, but for some other reason, I think. So the more stories that we can relay to PHFA, the better in helping with our advocacy that they should begin accepting new applications and processing existing applications and appeals. And it says, how about collecting a survey from all counselors? It's a great idea, Maria. So currently there's 88 people on this webinar. I think that we are, or you are, all the counselors now. If we don't, if you, perhaps if folks don't respond to this email, then I'll send out an email asking for more, for stories about HEMAP stories. I'll send out an email requesting HEMAP stories. But if you can just send it to me by email, that would also work. Is there any update on DHCD Housing Trust Fund grants? I don't believe so. Oh, Berta, sorry, I don't know. Oh, you know what? Berta just said, get closer to the mic. I forgot that I've got this little thing here. Wait, how's that? Is that better or worse? Is that better? Can you hear me? Can you hear me now? How about now? Berta, I'm sorry. I don't know what to say, but that's as loud as my microphone can work. I'm sorry, Berta. All right. So Scott writes, I feel that the moratorium is actually helping homeowners, giving them additional time to negotiate with the lender if possible. I discussed with Laurie Toy, who's the PHFA's head of HEMAP, a few weeks ago, and I think they based their decision on that. If counselors turn up the pressure on the lenders during this period, there should not be a lot of HEMAP applicants. This is my hope. Thanks for the comment, Scott. You know, I think there's also this issue, and I don't want to spend too much more time on HEMAP, but I think there's also this issue about many people who will have lost their source of income may not qualify right now for a one-time HEMAP grant. And so the question about who is it that would qualify for HEMAP? There's a sort of an outstanding question there. But I think that the bottom line is if you have a client, if you have any homeowners who are being harmed by by PHFA not accepting applications or not processing applications, please email me, and we can use those situations to ask PHFA to resume applications. All right, Rachel, do you want to talk about Chapter 13?
I just wanted to mention it as, you know, we're just thinking ahead to this huge number of people who are going to be behind, some of whom may not have government-backed mortgages or may not otherwise qualify for a loan mod, to consider Chapter 13 and in the future. And along with HEMAP and any other strategy for getting back on track. And that's part of the message there is, like, for people who do experience a temporary hardship, all of the government-backed mortgage guidance says the same thing, that people should take advantage of a forbearance for as long as they need it, but not for longer than they need it, because they are going to be behind at the end. So everybody has the option to shorten the forbearance if they want to. So if someone gets a 6-month now and they only need 3 months of it, they should get back in touch and say, I want to start making payments again, if that's what they want to do, because the smaller delinquency people have to deal with at the end, probably the better many of them are going to be, especially for those non-government backed mortgages. Let me just, okay.
I think we can skip these 2 slides.
Let's skip this, yeah. So let me just see if there's anything else in here before I turn it over to Kate. We already talked about PA Cares. And, you know, we'll forget about that. Okay, and I just wanted you to know at the last page, there are a bunch of links in addition to all the ones that are in the presentation, but this is kind of like a cheat sheet to get to all the guidance, basically, that I've discussed. Okay, I'm going to stop sharing my screen.
Okay,
now.
Rachel, while you're do that, so I just want to sort of quickly summarize and let people know about the resources that are available. So for the housing counselors, if you are working with homeowners who are suffering some kind of a COVID-19 related drop in income, the most important thing that you can tell them to do is to contact their servicer or help them contact their servicer to let them know that they're going to have trouble making their May or June mortgage payments. If you have any trouble getting through to your their servicer, please let us know on the survey that is linked to on the slides, but is also linked to at the clsphila.org website that Michelle Briggs had posted in the chat box earlier. After that, depending on what options are available, if it's a federally backed mortgage, then the folks should be entitled to receive at least a 6-month forbearance and possibly as longer beyond 6 months. If it is not a federally backed servicer, then folks are going to have to be working with their servicers, who will be offering a patchwork of loss mitigation programs. At this point, most servicers, at least every servicer that we know about, is offering at least a 3-month forbearance of the mortgage payments for non-federally backed mortgages. At the end of the forbearance, then folks will have a number of options. They may have a new loan modification to pay back the arrears. They may have that amount put at the end of their mortgage as a non-interest bearing balloon payment. They might enter into a repayment program, but borrowers and homeowners should not be told that their only option is just to repay that amount all at once. And if any of the homeowners that you're working with are telling you that, please let us know. That's sort of like the big picture issue. For the details, feel free to re-review Rachel's slides that have so much more information. We know that there's going to be a lot of snags in this and a lot of details that to go into, but I just want to cap the big picture. Rachel, did I get that right? Okay. Bernadette says, will we get a copy of this presentation? Yes, Bernadette, it's available at clsphila.org. And then there's a page that says for information for homeowners. Great. Kate Dugan, let's turn it over to you. Kate, do you need us to make you host, or do you have the ability to share your screen?
I think I can share my screen.
Terrific.
Hi, everyone. I miss you all. So the bad news is there's not a whole lot of COVID-19 specific property tax relief for homeowners. The good news means my presentation is going to be way shorter than Rachel's because there's so little help. So I am going to go ahead and try to share my screen. All right, so you can all see the, there we go. So again, not a whole lot of updates or information about this because property taxes go to support city services and schools. And as you might have heard, those places are running out of money, so they don't really want to excuse people from paying their property taxes. The city did extend the deadline to pay your property taxes or apply for an installment agreement to April 30th. So that is a 1-month extension from the normal deadline of March 31st. So if you're talking to somebody who has not yet paid their property taxes, they are not overdue yet, but they are due in 6 days. The city has extended, and this is probably irrelevant to most people you're talking to, the city has extended the deadline for most other kinds of taxes well into July. So property taxes are like the only kind of tax in the world that haven't been extended to at least midsummer. So the school income tax, which might apply to your clients if they have like a housemate who's paying rent to them or something, The deadline for that has been extended into July. The net profits tax, the business privilege tax. The city has posted a website where it has updates on all the different kinds of tax relief. So should the city decide to further extend the property tax deadline, they would post it on that website. And Mike, would I be correct that we can circulate this slideshow somehow or part of the presentation? Great. So how do you pay your taxes now that you can't go to the MSB? Because my advice to people is usually to go and pay in person. You can make sure your payments are being applied correctly, especially if you're in some sort of agreement. So you can still mail them in. You're supposed to include a payment coupon. If people don't have a printer, you know, again, like Margaret said, we're willing to help you get creative with that. You know, and we can certainly reach out to the city with you if you have somebody who wants to pay and like that's the only barrier. The city will make sure that you can, you know, pay your money. You can pay over the phone and online. It's a little limited in how you can do it. I believe you do need a bank account to do it. So if somebody doesn't have a bank account, it's not an option. You can't go to revenue in person right now. The MSB is closed until further notice. So if you have somebody who really can't pay their taxes in any way other than in person, let us know, because we want the city to know that this is a problem for people. So installment agreements, we've been all through this with you guys. If you want more information about installment agreements, you can go to the city's webpage. They're a way to spread out your current year tax payments over usually 8 to 12 months. I don't know what installment agreements would look like if you got into one in April. They're for seniors over 65, unremarried, 50 plus widows or widowers whose spouse was over 65 when they died, and people within certain income limits. So again, that has to be applied for by the tax payment deadline for interest and penalties not to accrue. So a lot of homeowners have suffered a loss in income related to their related to COVID-19, and they might call you and say, "I don't think I can make this lump sum payment in a week of my like $2,000 in property taxes." So you should discuss with the clients what their expenses are and what they should be prioritizing, keeping in the back of your head that installment agreements and UPAs could be great options for your client. So if your client is trying to decide what expenses to prioritize, keep in mind that the city is trying to help homeowners spread out these payments or get the money to them over time. Even if your client had high income before and would not have been eligible for one of these programs, make sure that you are looking at their current snapshot of income. Unlike mortgage servicers, the city is a little more lax about requiring like 60 days worth of pay stubs. So if they have no income and you can prove that, definitely apply for whatever programs you think they qualify for. The city might ask for continuing proof or more proof, but that gives you time. The other thing, the other kinds of people you might talk to are people who are in UPAs already. So, again, UPA is the owner occupied payment agreement, and that is an income-based agreement to pay your delinquent taxes, so taxes from previous years, and that it's tied to your income. So if somebody's lost income because of COVID-19 or any other reason, they have the right to request a modified UPA payment. So if your client lost their income, you should apply to modify their UPA. And again, this is not a COVID-19 specific program. This is something they have the right to do anyway. So even if they come to you and say, I lost my income for reasons completely unrelated to the pandemic, you should still apply for a modified UPA. Include as much documentation as possible. Just like anything else, you can apply before a missed payment. That's always preferable. If they're denied or if there's any other sort of glitch, we would be happy to help you. So you should refer the case to us. I'm going to see if there's questions, but I am having problems looking at that on my screen share.
Kate, I'll agree on. So Melissa asks, the installment plan is only to be applied for via mail, correct?
I believe you can apply for an installment plan over email. You can apply for an UPA over email. and the city has like a feature where you can digitally sign it. So I will double check that. But I would say at least housing counselors could apply over the mail, even if that's not something available to the general public. You know, if you send it, they'll review it, and if you have problems with that, let us know, because we understand that mailing stuff might be hard. You know, if somebody doesn't have stamps in their house or doesn't have a printer, so let us know if you're having technology problems with applying. Were there any other questions, Mike, that I should?
There's two out. There's there's a couple of mortgage questions. Let me ask. This is kind of like a mortgage / tax question. Patricia asks, what about the ongoing problem with the reverse mortgage companies paying property taxes before extension has expired?
I got a slide for that.
All right.
We'll get to that.
There's Juan and Patricia asked questions about mortgages, and so I'll wait to address those until after Kate's presentation.
Okay, thank you. I don't know why I can't pull up the chat box, but it stops my screen sharing. So submitting UPA and installment applications, the city is still accepting them. You can mail them, you can email them. They seem to be pretty understanding so far that people are going to have problems getting documentation, like even making copies of stuff, you know, getting proof of income, anything that you might need to physically go somewhere to get a record or request it by mail. It's a little harder to do these days. So don't let that delay you sending an application in. You know, just follow up with documents as soon as possible. If the city's giving you trouble, you know, we're happy to help you get creative in how to send stuff in. You know, our experience is the city is open to creativity as long as they get the documents. They aren't their official line is they aren't putting people in agreements right now because they are all working remotely and don't have the capacity. But they do seem to have some capacity to put people in agreements, quote, manually. And I'm not totally sure what that means. But people are getting into UPA agreements now. And, you know, theoretically, at some point, as people are able to go back into work, they will start to get people into agreements. You know, and as always, make sure you get a signed copy of that agreement signed by the city. So taxes and reverse mortgages. This is, and Rachel, if you want to like chime in with any of this, because I'm not totally sure how the deadlines you talked about interact with this. So right now, the tax payment deadline is April 30th. So servicers should not be making advances based on the March 31st deadline. But after April 30th, you know, to the extent they're not otherwise prohibited from doing so based on any, you know, federal or state regulations, you know, they could start making advances. And as always, you know, be careful if you have a homeowner who doesn't think they're going to be able to pay their property taxes and has a reverse mortgage. If they're in an installment agreement, you need to send a copy of that agreement to the lender right away, so the lender doesn't look and think there is a tax delinquency and make the advance. UPA is an even higher risk. So again, send a copy of the UPA to the lender. If there are interest and penalties that could be waived under the terms of the UPA, we encourage you to try to get the lender, you know, to the extent that you can't stop them from making an advance, only to advance that which the homeowner owes under the UPA agreement. And that is definitely something we can help you with. You know, we have had occasional luck with that. But, you know, we anticipate that, you know, people are going to be missing payments for their taxes, both because they've lost income and because it's just harder to pay your taxes. A senior who doesn't have stamps in their house or who would otherwise normally go downtown can't do it because the MSB is going to be closed through April 30th. And they might not feel safe or healthy going downtown even in May or June. So, you know, it's possible that you'll see more reverse mortgage companies making advances, you know, to the extent that they're allowed to.
Yeah, I would just say, I think there's nothing that would prevent the mortgage company from paying the property taxes after April 30th, but they wouldn't be able to turn around and initiate the foreclosure process. So people, if that does happen, they should know that one of the options, if they just need some more time, they should be able to get that extra 6 months at least to either pay it back or to get into an agreement to pay it back.
Thanks. Yeah. So a couple kind of special situations that we think you might see. And the first one is about the homestead. So normally, the homestead exemption is an exemption everybody should have on their house if they own and live in it. Saves you about $625 a year off your tax bill. If you have a client who you think should be in the homestead and they're not, do not have them pay their 2020 taxes yet. And the reason for that is that the city will put that person into the homestead if they get into an UPA. So we don't advise you to try to do this. So what we would advise that if you encounter a client who is not in the homestead and they have not yet paid their 2020 taxes, call CLS or make a referral before the client pays their 2020 taxes. The way to check if somebody has a homestead is to go to OPA's website, and I'll put a link in the chat box once I'm off of here. And there's just there's a box that says homestead, yes or no. So again, if you think they should be in the homestead and they're not, and they haven't paid their taxes, call us before you have them pay their taxes.
Hey, Kate, a couple of comments. Melissa, Amanda, and Maria all know that the homestead website does not appear to be working right now. Melissa says, I tried to apply for an online homestead yesterday and the website kept taking me to the apply page.
Yes, so currently, to the extent somebody would apply for the homestead now, like if I'm just like a normal person applying for the homestead, it would be that you're applying for tax year 2021. The deadline to apply for the homestead for 2020 was actually last year. The city will extend that though, if you get into an UPA. And so the reason the homestead's not working is this is not a relevant time to apply for the homestead, although theoretically somebody should be able to apply and be approved for tax year 2021. And my guess is they're just kind of like between like forms. But if anybody just goes ahead and applies right now, they will not be put into the homestead for this tax year. They will be put into the homestead for tax year 2021.
So Abraham's question says, even if they missed the deadline, and that was posted before you just answered that.
Yes. So, and this sounds like a lawyer trick, but the idea would be to have them miss the deadline, then apply for an UPA. And again, this is something we do not advise for housing counselors to do. But we're happy to talk to you about each individual client's circumstances to see if it makes sense. And if we think that they could get the homestead, that's $600 is a lot of money. The other thing we wanted to note, and that we think we're going to start seeing, is this funny thing with UPA tiers. So UPA has 5 tiers of payment agreement. And so you fall into a tier based on what your income is. People who have tier 4 income, which is I think about $700 to $1,600 for a single person per month. If they otherwise qualify for tier 4, which would give them a 5% of their income payment, and they meet certain other eligibility criteria, including being a senior or disabled or an unmarried widow, they actually qualify for this like kind of pretend tier 5 where they get to pay $0 a month, which is great. What we're hearing is the city, when they encounter somebody who on income qualifies for tier 4, but has one of these special circumstances, gives people the choice. They say, do you want a $50 a month payment or a $0 a month payment? We obviously always say, pick the $0 a month payment. It's much harder to default on, and you can still make payments. They'll still take your money. However, we have seen cases where the city only offers them the tier 4 agreement with the payment, even though they qualify for a $0 a month payment. I don't know how widespread this is going to be, but this seems possibly related to the city's budget. So if you start to see this, please let us know, and we can help you decide whether it's worth pushing for a $0 a month payment for that particular client or not. So I think Mike pretty much covered all the court stuff. Everything that goes for mortgage diversion goes for the rule hearing. So tax hearings have been suspended through May 29th. We don't know the new dates yet. We don't know when stuff will be rescheduled. Check the dockets, call the hotline if you need help figuring out when a case is. You can still try to resolve tax issues. We're still happy to help you apply. And the court would certainly, has expressed that they would appreciate any efforts to get stuff off their lists as soon as possible. And I don't know if Lisa Jordan is on this call. I know she was trying to get in. But she's definitely sensitive to the fact that these are crowded rooms and, people, especially with health issues, it might be a long time before they feel safe showing up at City Hall again. So anybody who needs to be excused should call the hotline and explain why. And the court will be understanding, as far as I know, about excusing people from physically appearing as long as it's clear that they are working towards resolving their issue. It's the same story with sheriff sales as it is with mortgages. There's lots of orders flying all over the place with tax sales. There's more tax sales every month than foreclosure sales, but as of today, all pre-July sales have been postponed to, I believe, mostly September. So you can check our website or the court's website for information about that. If you need help figuring that out, call us or call the hotline. If you need to postpone a July sale, we're not totally sure how that's going to work, depending on how open the courts are later this spring and early this summer. It's unclear what travel to City Hall is going to look like. So if you have a client who needs to file a motion in person, it's probably worth keeping an eye on the court's website or just, checking with us or the hotline to see if there are any special instructions. So I think that's pretty much it. I can see the questions now.
Great. Kate, so I'm going to address some of the mortgage-related questions. While I'm doing this, would you mind seeing if you can set up your computer to show the new referral forms? Great.
Got it.
So Patricia asked a question about 20 minutes ago. To be clear, delayed default judgments are delayed because courts are closed, right? Patricia, that's a great question. What we can tell you is that they are at least delayed until May 1st, pursuant to the court's order number 24. Just yesterday, we here at CLS were having a conversation about whether the court's order issued on Wednesday extends that deadline, or we would say tolls that deadline through May 29th. I don't think with certainty we can say that it's tolled through May 29th. We think so, but we're not sure. So what we can say with certainty is that those default judgment deadlines are delayed at least through May 1st. Patricia, if you're working with any client though that has a default judgment delay that ran sometime during the pandemic, during the course closure, reach out to us here at CLS, and we'd be happy to evaluate that client to see whether there's any merit to their case, as whether there's any defense to the foreclosure, and we can do that before May 1st.
Mike, I would just add that I think for any government-backed mortgage, I think it could be a violation of the CARES Act for them to take a default judgment before May 17th, but not to say they might not try it.
Great point. And as a practice tip, Patricia, if you want somebody at CLS to review the client's case to see whether there's a defense, send them on over to us and we'll take a look before May 1st.
Can you see it?
Yeah, well, hold on. There's one other question. Ana Benitez from Norris Square asked a question, and I'm going to scroll back up here. Can you repeat regarding how the 90-day forbearance back payments are paid? Will they be towards the end of the home loan? That would make more sense because some folks might or could not have income employment. The homeowner should not be penalized while all big corporations and financial institutions have been bailed out. Anna, this is a really good question, and I want to make sure that people hear this. I guess the first thing is that the 90-day forbearance is being offered to people without federally backed mortgages. So this is a 30% of homeowners without federally backed mortgages. If you do have a federally backed mortgage, if your mortgage, for example, is a Fannie Mae or Freddie Mac, FHA, then you should be offered at least a 6-month forbearance and possibly 12 months forbearance. So that's the first point I want to make sure that people are super clear on. The second is, well, what happens at the conclusion of this, this forbearance? Generally speaking, people have one of 4 options. They could repay the money if they somehow have access to 3 months worth of payments. We sometimes call that a reinstatement. They could enter into a repayment agreement where they repay the amounts over the course of, say, 6 or 12 months in the future, while also making their ongoing mortgage payments. They could have that amount be a lump sum payment at the end of their mortgage, which does not is a non-interest bearing lump sum, which goes at the end, or they could qualify for a loan modification, which is essentially a new mortgage, basically, with a new mortgage, which would incorporate the missed payments into the new principal, the term, new interest rate, etc. There are certain rules which apply as to who is going to be qualify for each of those 4. But the most important rule that people should know is that they should not be required to have to repay it all at once at the end of the forbearance. There are options that are available. We have heard from homeowners who are being told by their servicers, you can have a forbearance, but just know that come September, you're going to have to pay $3,000, the months that you missed. And that is incorrect, that there are options available. Rachel, do you want to add anything to that?
No, I think that's good. It's just important to know what kind of mortgage you're dealing with and whether the person was behind in March or not, because those are the big differences.
All right, any other, Katie asks, will HRP funds be available soon? And I think somebody actually had previously asked that question as well. I don't have any information about that. I know that a lot of people have the same question, but I don't know the answer. Does anybody who's on the call know about this, or whether the additional funds will be available? People might have seen Iram's email to everybody sort of surveying need, but I haven't heard any conclusive information about when they'll be available. All right, let's go back to Kate. And Kate, I'll set you up a little bit here. So as many people know, and hopefully everybody knows, if you go to CLS, a website I just posted in the chat, clsphila.org/HC referral, there are currently 2 referral forms there. One is if you want to refer a client to CLS who have a property tax issue, and one if you want to refer a client with a mortgage foreclosure issue. Generally speaking, people have, most of the people that refer clients over have printed these forms out, filled them in, and then scanned them and sent them back. And we recognize that in these very extraordinary times, that might be difficult. And so Kate Dugan and Dot Goldberger, who's a really fantastic CLS paralegal, have been working on forms and yeah, so that's my setup. And Kate, over to you.
Yeah, and I should make it clear that Dot is the PDF wizard here. I have no idea how she did this. So, so right, when starting like early next week, when you go to that HC referral page, you're going to see a lot more options. And one of the reasons is because COS now does tangle title work. So there are a bunch of combinations of problems your client might have. They might have just a mortgage problem, just a tax problem, but they might have like a mortgage and a tangle title problem, or a tax and tangle title problem. So there's going to be a form for each one of those things. We tried to make these, you know, as easy to use as possible, and are happy for any feedback you have. There's an instruction page. I'm just using the mortgage plus tangle title form as an example. So there's going to be some instructions on where to send the forms. All tax forms go to me, even if they have a tangle title problem. All mortgage forms are going to go to your CLS liaison, and you probably have the most updated chart for that. If you have a client who has no mortgage or tax problems and just a tangle title problem, I believe that's going to go to Rachel Gallegos. But the instructions for that will be on the worksheet. So there'll be a checklist of documents, the kinds of documents that we would want to see. You can check off the stuff that you have, and then you can just type, you know, counselor name. Type as much information as you can. Don't delay sending a form because you're missing information. You know, send us as much as you can, as early as you can. And then you can just email this to the appropriate person. So for example, everybody who's been trying to apply for the homestead, if those clients haven't paid their taxes yet, and you'd like us to talk to those clients about what their best option is, you could, you know, as early as this afternoon and maybe Monday, go, you know, get the tax form, fill it out, and we can talk to the client. So you would email that to me. So we do have a narrative section. So, you know, include as much information as possible. I think the forms are pretty straightforward. I don't see any questions about those. Again, so if you go to the website now, it's not up yet, but it will be up soon. And if you have a client with a mortgage, tax, and tangle title problem, like, send it to whoever, because that person has a lot of problems.
Great. Thank you so much, Kate. So we're almost at an hour and a half, which is, and it's lunchtime. Does anyone have any last questions? I know that some people have joined since the top of the meeting. Hey, Margaret, can you just repeat maybe the information that you gave about the hotline for the 10 or so folks that joined since you spoke at the beginning of the meeting?
Yeah, sure. So the hotline is up and running. I'll just give a little bit of a summary about what I said, which is that we're still making appointments using Google Calendar. We will work with you. Let us know what your situation is with remote appointments, and we will do our best to send clients to you and keep both you and the client informed about how the appointment's going to work. So go ahead and send your people to us. We are ready to work with them.
Great, thank you so much. Last call for questions. You can, if you're on calling, I think there's about 8 or 10 folks who are calling in by phone. If you have questions, you can feel free to unmute yourself and ask them now, or if you're joining us via on the Zoom video chat, you can put them in the chat box. Great. Well, I hope, let's see, Anna, do you give me, oh, sorry, Anna, I did. I will respond to you before the end of the day. Sorry. I'm gonna make a note of this here on my to-do list. Any other questions other than from people saying I haven't responded to their email? All right, well, hey, listen, it's Friday. Have a great weekend, everybody. It's also day 42, I think, of the quarantine. So good to see everybody. I wish it were in person, and one day soon it will be. Let's stay in touch, and we will another one of these perhaps next month. All right. See you, everybody. Take care.